And by the way, you're allowed to bop through this. Because the lunch bag is... Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch. I'm your host, David Turetsky, and I have alongside me from St. Charles Consulting Group, Craig Friedman. Craig, how are you?
I'm great, David. Thanks.
So this is an interesting HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch. We're going to go and totally geek out. We are going to totally geek out on HR data architecture and data governance.
Yep.
But before we do, Craig, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and a little bit about St. Charles?
St. Charles is a HR and especially L&D focused consultancy based out of Chicago. Been around for 20 years. I am the skills and talent transformation leader there, and author of the book Enterprise Skills Unlocked, which came out last summer.
We should put that link to the I'm sure it's on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
We should put the link in the comments so that people can get access to it.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So, Craig, before we get into the heat of the battle on HR data governance, first, what's the last thing you did for the first time?
Well, I had my gallbladder removed.
Oh, yes, the most useful part of our bodies, the gallbladder.
Yep.
But that's rather routine surgery these days.
Usually.
Wait, what? What happened?
Yeah, mine might have been just a little bit more eventful, but in the end, it's all good.
Okay. Anything you want to share with us on the eventful? They didn't take out too much, did they?
No. You know, when they do the disclaimer before you go in and they talk about like all the potential complications, I might have had a complication or two.
You checked a lot of those boxes?
Not all of them, but enough to concern my family for a couple of days. But
oh my goodness!
It's all good now.
You're okay.
I'm okay.
Okay.
100%.
And so you're full of gall still.
Yeah.
Well, we won't go there. You have no unmitigated galls or mitigated galls. You're just good.
I'm just good.
You're just good. So let's talk about this, because if anybody's ever followed our podcast for any length of time, you know that one of the things we love to talk about is we love talking about HR data. And, you know, there have been several episodes where we've talked about how HR data is just terrible. I mean, it's just garbage. And it's not really HR's fault. It's the fact that we're human, we're people, and the people data generated by people tend to be bad. I mean, it just tends to either lag events, or people moved and they didn't tell us, so they're in a different jurisdiction, or managers change people's job title and didn't tell us. I mean, there's a lot of ways. But
I've been front and center in some of those. As having to, on more than one occasion, invite everyone in a company to some mandatory training. It has frequently been my job to hunt through every last employee in the company that needs the training and try to find their email address and their contact information so we can invite them. And it's always a joy. Always.
And so I would imagine Active Directory would have been a better source than an HRIS, right?
You would think.
You would. But then you also have to worry about whether they're full-time people, part-time people, active. on
Yeah,
leave,
yeah.
terminated.
There's just all kinds of fun, right? And contractors who still need the training, and
Right.
people on secondment and leaves of absence, and recently transferred, and there's just all kinds of different categories. I did this several times in a health system, which is sort of especially fun because you know that most doctors aren't employees of the hospital
Sure.
where they
Sure.
work, right?
Right.
They're in
Right.
a
They're
separate
1099s.
practice, so technically they're all contractors of one sort or another.
Right.
Of course. So yeah, HR data is just a joy.
Well, and then you have to look up all that data. So even if you took the Active Directory data and then you put it against the HRIT data, of course their names are going to be spelled perfectly the same.
Oh yeah.
You're going to have an employee ID number in both systems that are actually references to each other.
Yep.
I'm being facetious for those of you.
Every form of muddled data you can imagine.
Yeah.
Right.
So doing VLOOKUP would be just an unmitigated waste of time.
Thank God for AI tools these days, because
Well,
cleaning up messy data is just not fun.
not unless they dream up the relationships.
I just got off a project where we were looking at skills data for a major enterprise, and if it's possible, that's even worse than like HR. Everybody's got to get paid, so somewhere in there that person is there, but skills, half the things that are supposed to have skills information, like courses or people, it's just not there at all.
Yeah. I have a problem, and obviously we're going to start talking about architecture and how to get it in order, but I have a problem with skills because they change on a momentary basis. You get a certificate in something, you learn a new skill, and it has to get updated. And then obviously some skills lapse. I mean, some skills go away. I may have known programming in the past, but nobody cares that I know COBOL or Fortran.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, how do you keep these things up to date? How do we keep a pulse on HR data? How do we create a modern data architecture?
Yeah, it's well, the first thing is obviously there's not one size fits all, right? It depends.
Right.
It depends, the consultant's refrain, it depends. But it depends on so I'm focused on skills data primarily, right? So like, where does the skills data live, and how do our systems communicate that data back and forth, and what's the sophistication or complexity of your existing tech stack, and
Right.
How current, like you said, how current does the data need to be? What kind of expertise do you have in-house?
Right.
Because more complex solutions require greater data architecture or engineering skills. And then, like, what's your biggest pain point? What problem are you actually trying to solve? Because you can do point solutions or more enterprise solutions depending on what your objectives are. But I basically see 5 strategies that are sort of the most common strategies, with a great big caveat that, like, there's a lot of hybrid. It's probably more common is hybrid. So I can talk about 5 strategies, but that's almost a little academic, but it's a starting point for any approach, right? So the first one would be like system of record, right? That's sort of the simplest. Everything lives usually in the HCM, single source of truth, sort of like having a file cabinet for all your important documents, right?
Right.
Good for small companies or those maybe starting their skills journey. But, it's got some drawbacks. It's limited. One of the big things is it's limited to whatever the functionality of that core system is. And, from a skills perspective, a lot of them right now, today, like the skills taxonomies are pretty rudimentary, right? So if you want a more advanced kind of solution, it's more challenging.
Right.
Another strategy is sort of the data lake idea. You throw everything in a data lake, and then you can run analytics on it. Now that's a copy of the data, right? You're copying it into a database.
Rather routinely.
Right. So it's not real time. Usually it's a nightly feed. It can be on a different schedule.
Right.
But it's mostly for analytics, right? So it doesn't. It's not going to give you the kind of real time information that you would need if you were like trying to make a staffing decision in a talent marketplace, but it will run like talent analytics over everything, right? Then you've got one of the more elegant but complicated solutions is the skills graph idea. So it's not a copy of the data, right? It's sort of like a master map that helps all the systems translate back and forth their various different skill definitions. So like Python development in one system is equal to Python programming in another, and is equal to Java in a third, or whatever. It does all those translations, and it creates the taxonomy and the relationships between them.
Sure.
But the data stays where it is, right? The graph is just coordinating.
So it's still sitting in a system of record, but the graph sits on top of that.
It's sitting in all the various distributed systems. It's not centralized.
Okay.
Right. But like if you were to make an inquiry, it would translate like that's in these systems. If you're looking for Java programming, look here, look here, look here. And then it'll.
So is that an API, or is that a? And for those of you who don't know,
it's usually leveraging like middle-ware.
Okay.
To actually do the call.
It's a real-time pipe between the systems.
The graph itself is just like a representational engine. Sure. It defines the relationships, right? It has to leverage middleware to speak back and forth to the various systems. Okay. But that does bring us to just data interfaces, APIs, right? Yep. Which is, like one system making a phone call to another system. It's not a centralized solution at all, right? It's just this system asks that system and gets a feedback. It has its advantages for people just starting out in smaller systems, smaller companies. Like if you only got a few systems that need to talk, but it doesn't scale all that well if you are a major enterprise and you have many, many systems, right? And then the fifth one is, what's that?
That's number 4.
That's 4, and 5 is event-driven streaming, right? So that's the notion that anytime anything changes, right? My LMS records that David just completed a course in project management, and it broadcasts it out to all the other systems in real time, right? So like a radio broadcast or podcast or live podcast or something, right? And then all the other systems have it. It's great for real time. It's particularly good for like talent marketplaces if you're trying to support a talent marketplace. Of course, you need like platform engineering skills in the company to be able to architect that, right? But those are sort of what I would consider, at least what I see as sort of the 5 main strategies.
Yeah. Let me poke some at some of them, because obviously for anybody who's been in the HR tech world, you've dealt with one of those 5 types of architectures, or you're actually dealing with all 5, depending upon which company you're dealing with. Because in your world, Craig, you deal with L&D and you deal with skills. In my world, I deal with compensation as well as performance management and other talent management techniques, as well as, on the other side, some of the payroll and other functions like benefits. And each one of them may have components of that. Now, the one that's kind of the more expensive and the really heavy-duty one is the data lake, which takes real development real development resources to be able to not only integrate all these separate systems together, as you were saying, kind of on a more routine or regular basis, but that you have to have a really good set of middleware infrastructure programmers to deal with that.
Yeah. And
you, as the end user consumer, in some ways you need to be a little more technical, because you're dealing with the star schemas or the snowflakes or the whatever.
Right.
That you could put something on top of it like a Power BI, but really they're very complex. Yeah. So I guess my question is, when we look at the 5, you really are kind of self-selecting depending on what your particular area of HR is. And as I said, sometimes you're such a large company, you may actually have all 5 depending upon who you are.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, sure. I mean, maybe 2 years ago, I was dealing with one of the major global consulting firms. We were interacting with the global enterprise, right? So I don't know if you know how those companies are structured,
Sure.
but for legal reasons, they're all like
Separate.
every country is a separate legal entity,
Oh yeah.
right? So you've got like 150 member firms, and they all have different. Even when they can agree, like our LMS is, is going to be, Cornerstone or whatever.
Right.
They have different instances in Asia, from Europe, from North America, right? And
The firewall between them too. So
right, and everything is architected differently,
Yeah.
and so you can imagine if you've got that kind of situation going on, the single source of truth probably isn't going to work, right? I don't know. Maybe it might work in South America,
Well,
possibly.
if it's payroll, because payroll is the one thing that probably ties them all together, right? Although they may actually have separate instances of that, but probably not. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, because I tend to focus more in the skills area.
Right.
But I mean, the challenge with skills is the whole. It's just a less mature space across the board. So every great thing we've learned and we know about HR data and payroll and compensation and employee contact info and all that stuff, you're just starting further back with skills, right?
Yeah.
We don't even have standard definitions of what all the skills are. We don't have data.
Right.
We don't even have a definition for, a common definition for each skill.
Right.
You have to start all of that from scratch.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if we had all common behaviors and levels, so that we wouldn't have to try and create it from scratch every time?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can buy,
Sure.
skills taxonomies
Right.
that are out there that people have gone to the trouble of, doing statistics and everything, coming up with them. But even when you try to leverage them, they're not customized to your company, and you can't update and modify it if you've actually licensed it, right? So
Right.
like, if you want to change your own, set of skills or relationships or something for whatever, then you have to work around it.
Well, you also need a codex if you're actually buying more than one, because if you're adding two together, let's say you have technical skills you're getting from Bradford, and you're getting whether it's HRSoft or Salary.com or St. Charles or whomever, you're getting skills from them. Having a Rosetta Stone that brings them all together, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's where you sort of get into that skills graph idea, the translation engine, right?
Right.
But the fun thing about skills is most companies don't realize they already have multiple taxonomies.
Sure.
If you are licensing skills from Principio and Franklin Covey, they each have their own way that they organize skills. Mm-hmm. It's either explicit or it might be implicit in the way they've organized their curriculum and their learning objectives,
Right.
but one way or another, they each obviously must have organized their skills and given them names.
Right.
So that they can do what they do in their library and
Right.
do basic library management. The idea that they correspond one-to-one, very unlikely.
Right.
Not to mention the fact that, again, because it's a less mature area, you're going to have a lot of assets in the. So like, skills data itself is connected to a lot of things. It's connected to jobs. It's connected to work tasks, like talent marketplace. I need these skills to perform this job. It's connected to learning courses and obviously people.
Yeah.
Right. The learning courses is a small nightmare because you have like 10-minute learning, videos that are teaching a micro skill and week-long, manager training programs that you fly in that have probably 36 skills that the program is teaching. And it's not like most learning management systems have a standard unit of learning. It's like, everything somehow connects at a 2-hour increments that we give one skill to, right? It's
that's
all
what I was
over.
going to say. It's kind of like credit hours, like back in college, right? If it took me an hour and a half, or you mentioned 2 hours, if it took me 2 hours to complete this course, well, that's 2 credit hours. So there is kind of that underlying measurement that you took this training for 2 hours and therefore, don't they?
Yeah, but it doesn't tell you what you learned. right?
Right. But you learn something.
You learn something.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know,
We don't know what
some industries,
proficiency you're at with it, but you learn something.
yeah. So some industries are regulated, so
Right.
they have some reporting requirements that are standardized for them. And that can be helpful from a sort of data model standpoint, the skills data model standpoint, because somebody external is forcing them to do that. But, you know, there's plenty of businesses that don't have that, and then it's a wild west.
But wouldn't it be up to then the assessment piece of skills to then be able to understand where you are from a level perspective?
Oh, I mean, assessment, that's like a whole nother brown bag lunch.
Okay, we'll book it now, but
Yeah.
because where I'm going with that, if I could put you at a level based on the assessments, and yeah, we'll talk about it at some other time, but wouldn't that be the answer?
I mean, so the problem with assessment, real quickly, especially in this idea of a skills-based organization, today most places they give you credit for skills when you complete a training course, and that's pretty one-to-one, right? And so it's like, I took the course online, I took the multiple choice test, I have the skill. That's sort of rudimentary how it works. Skills-based is much more complicated because it gives you credit for I demonstrated it on the job.
Right.
I got a positive performance review that said I could do it. I've got some external certification. I think I have at least some level of proficiency because I have a mentor who's been teaching me, or I've been doing a lot of time in a community of practice.
Right.
And so, first thing
and I'm
you
a
need
thought
is
leader in it. I've spoken at
I'm a
conferences.
thought leader in it, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm an author. How does that count? Blah blah blah. Which, by the way, is a fair question. So first, you need different assessment methods depending on. You can't do a multiple choice test for learning on the job very effectively. So you have to have a suite of different assessment methods depending on how you acquired the skill in the first place, and then you need cross validation techniques to try to figure out, well, if you have one training course and a 6-month project, what level of proficiency does that map to? As opposed to David, who has now taken, 70 hours of training in a really advanced thing. Does he know more than I know with my 3-month project?
Probably not. He might have been multitasking the entire time.
Right. So there are like I said, another brown bag lunch. We can go through 5 more strategies of cross data validation just to get to the, what level of confidence do we have that David has this proficiency level?
But let's step back a second, though, because we've been talking about data architectures of being able to get everything to fit together. And how do we keep the right thing in the right place? And you mentioned throughout that conversation and the description of the 5 levels or the 5 different avenues that a company could take, that smaller companies might be better off with certain things and larger companies might actually, and we kind of got to the agreement that large companies might actually have multitudes of these things.
Yeah.
And then you gave the example of the accountancy or the consulting firm that it's built on 150 of lots of big company probably. Mm-hmm. So if someone's listening to this, I don't want to get them confused. Each one of those things has, I guess, gateways to get into them, right? The system of record one is pretty easy.
Yeah.
If you store all your employees in one place, it's probably a good idea to make sure that you're storing the right things in the right place. And it's probably pretty rudimentary, but at least it's usable, right?
Yeah. I mean, the system of record is the single source of truth. It's the simplest one if you can manage it. And I mean, even if you are planning to do something, if you're a big enterprise with a complex system, but your skills journey is going to start out modestly focused, you could start there. I mean, one of the things we talk about at St. Charles all the time is you might do better to pick a particular business problem and just build a portion of your skills taxonomy around solving that. This business unit has a growth problem that is dependent on some skills that are hard to acquire. Right. And so we're going to have to be creative about where we find it in the market and where we build it internally, build, buy, borrow, move people around the organization, maybe redesign their workflows to free up time, whatever the combination of strategies you're using to try to get the capacity that you need to support your growth goals.
Right.
Like, keep it focused there.
So
build
it's
the
on growth.
taxonomy.
Yeah.
Just build the taxonomy you need for that, and the integration points, and sort of test it out. And so, like, you could go with a single source of truth just for that solution, and then if you need to get more complicated as you start expanding your skills architecture, you can talk about adding a data lake when you add more systems, or you can talk about adding a knowledge graph later, depending on what your needs are, right?
Right, but probably the next step would be, what's the next business problem? Or seeing how hard it is to maintain the data and the skills around that original business problem, and then doing better the next time, right? I mean, you're going to learn lessons from having, if not solve the problem, address the problem.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure. And certainly maintenance on multiple fronts is a challenge, which actually brings us to the second layer of the data architecture, because I was just talking about the basic rudiments of where the data is stored and how systems communicate with another. There is like an intelligence layer that you can sit on top of that, right? Certainly the one that everybody's talking about now is AI inference. Everybody's talking about that. And we just talked about multi-source validation workflows, right? And we touched on skills ontology. That all is an intelligence layer that sits on top, but you can do skills decay modeling, talent analytics, personalized recommendations. You see that with talent marketplaces and recruiting. Yeah. But you can also use personalized recommendations for learning. Right? What course or what, learn. Again, skills-based organizations will have multiple channels for acquiring a skill. I could look up a gig in a talent marketplace or a 10-hour training course, and AI can help recommend, I think the gig would be better for you.
Yeah.
So all of that is intelligence that sits on top of any one of the 5 architectures. Or more likely what usually happens is the underlying architecture is a hybrid to begin with.
Right.
And then you're building elements of intelligence on top of the hybrid.
It seems very complex. And I guess my question would be, how does someone generate, and we're going to run out of time, so I have to apologize for this. Maybe we'll actually start with this when we start talking about the assessments, but how does someone try and determine where to begin and how to get an ROI out of this? Because I've been trying to speak this from the mountaintops. For companies to invest in HR, especially in skills and a lot of the L&D stuff that we see, they need an ROI. And they're asking for an ROI. So how do you build ROI around this? Because it seems very expensive.
Yeah, well, like I said, sort of start simple and focus on a business problem. The great thing about skills is it can drive or help support really good ROI business cases, right? Like I was talking about business growth, right? So that's top line revenue growth.
Right.
We were talking about consulting companies, right? Talent marketplaces get resources that are unstaffed. In other words, you're paying for them to do nothing.
Right.
There's like inventory, gathering cost.
Right.
And it moves them from the cost column immediately into billable hours, right, into revenue. So that revenue capture is a very real ROI. If I could, make that process 10%, 15% more efficient, that's literally going to shift cost to revenue in this, in this period. So there's some pretty powerful, argument. We did an asset management strategy. So we worked with a heavy industry company that had large assets that are aging, but, there's no way that they can replace them, right, in mining as it happened.
Oh, yeah.
Scarce talent, right? People are retiring, the people who know the systems, the new kids who are coming out of college don't want to work with ancient systems or tech, right? So that's a very real and very expensive problem. And if a skills solution can help them resolve that problem, that's, a big asset management benefit. So there are some very powerful ROIs if you're savvy about talking to your business leaders and finding out what their business goals are, their objectives, and trying to then back into what are the human capability challenges that are preventing us from reaching that.
I think what we might need to do, though, Craig, is open up the part 2 of this by talking about a few things. One is, how easy is it to get to that ROI? Because you mentioned a few different ways of being able to get there, and I think that really we probably need to flesh them out a lot more, because we're running out of time on this one and we're not going to be able to get there. And the second is to talk about assessments and how do we get to the next step, where once you have a good model for your skills infrastructure, how do you then use it? So if you don't mind, I'm going to bring you back for those.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much for being here, Craig. You're awesome. And I learn a lot every time I talk to you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend and stay safe.